Hello, and welcome to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. This is the podcast that looks at one film in each episode and uses it to explain the 9 types and 3 instinctual biases of the Enneagram model of personality. One movie, one type. My name is Mario Sakura, and I'll be joined by Maria Jose Munita and Tamer Zanatti. We are the principals of Awareness to Action International, a global consulting and training company that specializes in practical applications of the Enneagram. You can find out more about us and our work at awareness-to-action.com. In the meantime, make some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast. I'm Mario Sakura, and I'm here with Maria Jose Munita.
Hi, Mario.
Unfortunately, Tamer's not able to be with us today, but we do have a special guest, a good friend of the show, and in fact, somebody I would go so far as to call him the spiritual godfather of this podcast, the great and legendary Enneagram teacher, Tom Condon. How are you, Tom?
Walking and talking.
That's always a great way to start the day. It's good to have you with us. The reason I referred to Tom as the spiritual godfather of the podcast is because Tom has written a book. What is it? 3 editions now? 4 editions? The Enneagram Video and Movie Guide. Did I get the title right,
At least 3, yeah.
At least 3, yeah. So Tom has been teaching the Enneagram since, what, the 70s? Give us quick background, Tom, on you and your Enneagram.
It was 1949, actually.
1949, the war had just ended.
The late 80s. I came across the Enneagram in Berkeley, California, where I lived, where Helen Palmer was conducting kind of evening classes, and most of my friends were therapists, and they knew about the Enneagram. It was in the air. This would be 1980 or so. I had a private practice in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and Ericksonian hypnosis. Once I learned about the Enneagram, I thought that would be a sort of massive compliment to the kind of thing I was doing, which was helping people change, but with systems that were not good for understanding the whole person. And the Enneagram was sort of the other way around, at least at that point. Everything was negative. The names were all insulting, the names of the different Enneagram styles. And there weren't very many recommendations about what to do once you knew all these bad things about yourself.
Right.
And I had with my background, the emphasis was on growing and changing and outgrowing limitations. So it seemed like a kind of natural marriage.
Yeah.
And late in the 1980s, I started teaching it. Once the books came out, and people didn't look at you blankly when you mentioned the name and ask if that was the same thing as the pentagram.
Right. I still get that on occasion.
Yeah.
So I remember back then I was introduced to the Enneagram in 1994, and around that time, it might have been shortly thereafter, came across your set of recordings, Easy in Your Harness, that I found very instrumental in my understanding of the Enneagram. So we've been friends for a long time, but I've been following your work for even longer. Maria Jose, what do you want to say about Tom?
He was one of the first teachers that I heard about, and I keep seeing him at conferences and like his style. I like your style, Tom. I like it how you observe, and we're going to talk about that in another podcast, but how you navigate the Enneagram community in a masterful way.
What we're going to do, Tom's going to sit with us as we talk about Jerry Maguire and Enneagram-Type Three, which is our topic today. And then we're going to have a more general conversation, and which will be part 2 of this episode. Now, the reason we wanted Tom on here, number one, he's one of the handful of Enneagram teachers that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And he kind of did a lot of really great work around the Enneagram in movies and using movie characters to help bring to light the Enneagram types. Tom, take a quick minute, if you would, and tell us kind of how you started with that and why you settled on that or kind of landed on that as a way to talk about the Enneagram.
I started kind of noticing that about 1990, noticing that there were Enneagram types in certain films. And the kind of epiphany that I had came from watching Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. With Frederick March, the old one.
Wow, yeah.
Where he turned from virtuous one-ish Dr. Jekyll into kind of Maniac 7 with an 8 streak. And that just blew my mind. Just realizing I was seeing it without knowing that I was seeing it, which is a broader experience people have with the Enneagram. You know, that was I just had a thought.
Yeah.
That was
Okay. Good. All right. So
anyway, I was the guy who published the audio series that you're talking about, Easy in Your Harness. He worked for the National Catholic Reporter. He also published Richard Rohr's early stuff, Clarence Thompson.
Clarence.
And he and I were friends, and he was also publishing a quarterly called Enneagram Educator.
Right.
So I started a column and reviewing movies. And the idea was to let people create panels for themselves rather than... You know, the two problems with the Enneagram were what to do with it and then how to get good at noticing Enneagram styles and identifying them. That was a reply.
Gotcha.
And anyway, one thing led to another. I did a column for a while. I went rollerblading for the first and last time in my life. And I broke my leg in 6 places. And while I was
you had
recovering,
some time on your hand, huh? Yeah.
I had some time on my hands, so I fleshed out what I had written for the column and turned it into a book.
Gotcha. And so for anybody who has not seen the book, I highly recommend it. It's, I think, in the 3rd edition now, you said. The Enneagram Video and Movie Guide? Is that still the title?
Video Guide.
Movie and Video Guide, right. Available on Amazon and other great places to get your books. So check that out. Now we're going to get back, after we talk about Jerry Maguire, we're going to spend some time talking about the Enneagram in general and Tom's approach to it and the Enneagram world in general. So please stick around after we talk about the movie. So let's take that and get into the movie Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire was released in 1996, starring Tom Cruise, Renee Zellweger, and Cuba Gooding Jr., who actually won a Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in the movie. We're seeing another movie by our friend Cameron Crowe from the last episode, who also wrote and directed Almost Famous. This was prior to Almost Famous, and kind of when Cameron Crowe was at his peak. It's a movie that did pretty well. It made, I think, $75 million worldwide on a budget of about $50 million, I think I saw. So very profitable. Tom Cruise was also nominated for an Academy Award. And the movie was quite a big deal at the time. In our view, this movie really represents Enneagram-Type 3. And whenever we do trainings and, want people to get a sense of what a 3 looks like, we always say to them, just watch any Tom Cruise movie, and you're basically seeing a 3 in action. Right? Tom, do you see the same sort of pattern in Tom Cruise and Type 3?
Yeah, I sure do. I was thinking about it, too. This movie that we're about to discuss, Jerry Maguire, is almost the same movie as Rain Man. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yes, of course.
where he goes from being a slick, dissociated three-ish salesman to somebody who gets in touch with their heart, basically.
Yes.
Or in the Jerry Maguire case, he goes in and out of it, but finally, at the end of the film, why he's landed in it.
Yes. It's interesting. So we'll come back and talk about the three in a minute. But for me, this movie, first of all, really did capture the three in ways that we'll certainly talk about. It almost felt like I wouldn't even say a redemption movie, but almost a salvation movie from my view, right? I mean, this character who does feel lost, right, without knowing it at first. And I think the same thing does apply to Rain Man, right? This character who seems to have it all together, but then realizes he's an empty, lost soul and seeks redemption through the heart, through relationships.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, I think that the whole movie is kind of three world. And as we've done with the previous movies, it's not just one character, but the whole theme of the movie. And in this case, it's kind of the industry, it's three, the characters display three kind of characteristics, and definitely Jerry Maguire is a really good example of a three.
Yeah. So let's, before we come back to talking about how the movie describes the three, let's talk about what a three is, right? For those people who are still learning about the Enneagram. And so we have our way of talking about the three. And then, Tom, I'm going to ask kind of how you talk about threes, right? And, what in your mind makes a three. But for us, what we've been doing is, first of all, identifying the kind of the classical Enneagram characteristics, right? So there's the classic vice of the three, which is deception. Okay, creation and promotion of a false identity. There's the fixation, which is vanity, kind of love of the image and obsession with the image. And then there's the virtue, which was truthfulness, okay? A hunger for honest identity and experience. And those themes are certainly on display in this movie, right? I mean, it's, there's a lot of conversation about honesty and truth and brutal truth and, that sort of thing. So with the awareness to action approach, we talk about, preferred strategies, and the strategy is striving to feel outstanding, right? This desire to stand out, to be accomplished, to be recognized. Again, something that exudes in this movie. We also talk about the core quality of value and how our sense of value becomes stunted in us early in life. And the key challenge of the three is to find that sense of inherent value independent of accomplishment, which can be difficult to do in an accomplishment-driven world. Right?
Value of themselves, you mean?
Exactly. And how is it distinguished from what I do? Right. We talk about how an infant has fundamental inherent value. You bring an infant into a room and everybody kind of gathers around like it's this precious creature, when in fact they don't have a huge amount of return on investment. Right. With babies, the things they do, they're a cost center. Right. The things they do are not so pleasant, but they're cute, but we cherish them anyway. But later in life, our value becomes based on what we do in life. And there's a lot of, this is what I do in Jerry Maguire too, but we'll come back to that. So I'm curious, Tom, when you think about threes, what characteristics stand out for you?
I work with people. I do a lot of coaching. And one of the things that I look for when I work with threes is a split between who the person is seeming to be versus who they really are deeper down. In other words, a split between who I fear I am versus who I'm in the process of trying to become. And who I'm in the process of trying to become is the opposite of who I fear I am. So I grow up poor. I'm trying to be rich. I have a self-image that relates to that. But the poor person that I was when I was growing up, that's following me. And when threes, I'm talking about when threes are in their trance, when they're at their best, they're kind of in touch with their heart and have leadership qualities and a kind of idealism that lacks irony, a kind of sincere, heartfelt layer of sentiment or stream of sentiment towards the people in their lives. But on the low side, when they get caught in their pattern, they split. And who they're trying to become is kind of tells you who they're trying not to be. You know, if I'm, whatever it is I'm kind of trying to impress you with or trying to put across to the world, then there's an insecure Achilles heel element to that's less conscious. And as threes grow and change, those two polarities get closer and closer together. There's some of that in the film we're going to discuss. And as threes grow and change, they become really authentic to themselves. I mean, the trick with twos, threes, and fours, I think, is becoming, in a broad way, becoming more real instead of playing a role and getting lost in the role and over-identifying with the role.
When we talked about Almost Famous, there was this theme of honesty as well, right, and truth. And just to tie that to your point about the 2, 3, and 4.
Awareness to Action offers a unique approach to applying the Enneagram professionally with leaders and organizations, as well as for personal development. What makes us stand apart is our Enneagram expertise and focus on understanding human nature.
We know people because we see people. And this is a skill set that can be taught and learned. Human nature is complex and simple at the same time. Our mission is to help people see clearly and act accordingly. Why? Because the ability to see ourselves and others clearly and honestly is essential. It enables us to act in more adaptive and useful ways.
The multicultural team at Awareness to Action will help you learn tools and practices to become more aware and also to understand and engage people more effectively. Learn more at awareness-to-action.com. Join us at 2021 for exciting learning opportunities.
In our approach, what we also see in threes is the connecting points. And the two connecting points for the three is 6 and 9. And so they're striving to feel outstanding, but they also use this striving to feel secure as a something that they neglect. So they kind of avoid it, but you can see that there's this anxiety underneath, and that they want to feel secure about what their goals are, if they're going to be able to accomplish what they want and all of that. And also they use the support strategy of striving to feel peaceful. And so they kind of avoid conflict, unnecessary conflict, or all the things that prevent them to get to their goals, accomplish what they want. The other thing that we see in threes is that there's something that what we call the accelerators, that it's what it helps nurture the core quality. And it's, in this case, for the threes, purpose. So writing and working on a personal purpose can help them find that value. So it's not someone's agenda that they're following with no sense of direction, but it's their inner kind of guidance that they get from this purpose that they can develop. Yeah.
Comes from the inside out.
Yeah.
Rather than the outside in. Yeah.
And we'll see that definitely in the movie.
That's a big part of the movie. It's kind of what sets off, Jerry's crisis, but ultimately his redemption is this idea of, it's not a memo, it's a mission statement, as it says, right? Throughout. So just for anybody who has not seen Jerry Maguire, and I'm curious, Maria Jose, had you seen the movie prior to us picking it as a movie to talk about?
Yes. Years ago, when it came out.
Okay.
And because we are kind of coming to newer movies now. And so I've seen them. I was old enough when they were released. So this one I remember the quotes and the "you complete me" and those phrases did have an impact. And so I remember it. I watched it. And
good. Good. All right, great. So, so Jerry Maguire is a sports agent played by Tom Cruise, and he has this. He's on top of the world, and then he has this bit of a crisis. One of his client's sons, kind of makes him feel bad, and so he asks himself, who have I become? And he has this kind of personal crisis that he tries to solve by creating writing a mission statement for his company, which gets him fired. He decides he's going to start his own sports management company, but the only person who goes with him is Dorothy, played by Renee Zellweger, and who is a 26-year-old single mother who's kind of got a crush on Jerry and also is touched by his idealism displayed in the mission statement. He ends up only with one client, and through the course of the movie, falls in love with, first of all, breaks up with his fiancée, falls in love with Dorothy, becomes friends with his client. They all teach each other about love and commitment, and after trials and tribulations, they live happily ever after, at least for the 2 hours and 10 minutes of the movie. Honestly,
he turns into the Tom Cruise we like.
He turns it because he does start out as the Tom Cruise we don't like, quite frankly. I had seen this movie when it came out and probably had seen it, here and there over the years. When I rewatched it the first time for this podcast, I kept thinking, I really don't like this guy. Right. I mean, I just do not like this guy. And when I watched it again last night, I think I was a little more sympathetic. It might have been the whiskey I was drinking, but I felt some sympathy for him. But, he really does, particularly in the beginning of the movie, display those lower side of the three qualities. Go ahead.
In my case, it's interesting because I don't particularly like him, but it was the opposite. When I watched it for the first time prior to the podcast, I felt sorry for him. It wasn't like I didn't like him. It was like, poor guy, and
right.
I could see him struggling. So I liked him more than I even wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. So general reactions to the movie. Maria Jose, what did you think about the movie in general?
I was just astonished at how much three there's in the movie. So it was, because I watched it the first time years ago without that kind of filter. And now it was just three everywhere. So I couldn't get that thought off my mind. I think it was also a sweet movie. As I say, I wasn't disgusted by all the kind of superficial American typical kind of things that were there. I went straight to the kind of the struggle, the suffering of the characters, and I enjoyed it.
Good. I want to come back to that American thing in a moment. But Tom, what's your general reaction to the movie?
And here I'm talking North American, not just American.
We're going to get to that,
general.
Maria Jose. Hold that thought. Okay, hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Go ahead, Tom.
It was very three-ish, and it was very much a type of Tom Cruise movie. And then, like Maria Jose says, the whole context was very three-ish. The whole sports agent, just the realm of sports, at least in the way that it was presented. I was kind of aware of some of the connections to other characters and the interplay and the dynamics. For example, the fiance that he broke up with struck me as at least three-ish. It wasn't definitive, but she was pretty much like he was.
Yeah, a three with an edge.
Yeah, and the sister of Renee Zellweger, Bonnie Hunt, played by Bonnie Hunt, she was pretty one-ish, and it was a kind of moral tentpole for the film. In contrast, and then she sort of came around, so that helped you like Tom Cruise a little more. The Renee Zellweger character I thought was pretty 90. And in a very receptive, kind of spongy, kind of humiliating way, until later in the film where she really found her feet and found her
Yes.
voice and began being a kind of through line for him.
Yeah, she became sort of the adult in the relationship eventually, right?
Yeah.
It was one of the probably the most famous performance in the movie is Cuba Gooding Jr., right? I found him sort of seven-ish, sort of, what we would call a transmitting three, but a bit back and forth on his
me too.
Enneagram type.
Me too. Yeah.
But a great performance, I thought.
Yeah, he was very good. And they were meant to sort of mirror one another too. And
right.
At each phase,
right. Okay, good. So a few scenes we're going to take a look at here. So we have to start with the opening of the movie. I mean, the credits sequence. And so, we made a joke about the North American thing.
It was more like it was an insult, actually.
Well, it was, yeah, it was. It was not a well disguised insult. So that's but that's okay. So Maria Jose is from Chile, and what people in the United States forget so often is that America refers to a whole half of the world, right? North and South America are part. Yeah, I know, Tom. This is news to us. We live in the United States of America, but tend to think of ourselves as America and Americans. That points a bit to the self-centeredness, I think, or self-absorption, perhaps, of the United States, which I would suggest is a pretty three-ish culture. Right. I don't think that's a particularly bold statement. And if you remember how the movie opens, it's a satellite going around the planet and then focusing on the United States. Right? And then zooming down onto starting to talk about athletes and these great young athletes. Go ahead, Maria.
But before they start talking about the athletes, when they zoom to the United States, it says, "Oh, okay, that's better." I don't care about the rest of the world. Now I'm talking. This is all I care about. It's the United States.
Yes, yes. You seem confused by that, Tom.
So what's your point?
He doesn't understand what the problem is.
So anyway, from that, but that does send a message, I think. Again, it speaks to the cultural aspect, and we do see that, even though certainly not everybody in the United States is three, there are these cultural overlays that we see, when we look at different countries, different cultures, right? We've all talked about this and talked about different countries. The U.S. is certainly a three-ish culture, right? It's about achievement and accomplishment and looking good and all.
In terms of what it unconsciously values.
Yeah,
and sometimes consciously. Well, that there's obvious stuff like we have a lot of billionaires now. And they're looked up to in a certain way, and business successes and sports and celebrity of all kinds. Yeah, that's not that unusual. It's in every culture to a degree, but it's really kind of more fundamental within our culture. That if someone in Europe wins a lottery, they're considered nouveau riche. Whereas if someone in America wins a lottery, they suddenly jump class.
Yes. So there is certainly this worshiping of success in this country. And no matter how that success is earned, sometimes, right? To your point, right? Winning the lottery is not a huge feat, right? It's not a Herculean effort towards self-improvement. It's just spending $1 on a lottery ticket, but that doesn't matter. So this sets up the whole, the beginning of Jerry Maguire is all about this. Now, he's a sports agent. After they show these great athletes, and he's talking about how these athletes are going to be stars and rich and successful, and you're going to see them in the Olympics, it cuts to him going into talking about himself. So he is I keep wanting to say movie agent, but he is a sports agent, and they show him schmoozing at some meeting, and he's kind of glad-handing people and, network flattering people, telling them how great they look, all these sort of things. We also get another cameo from Jan Wenner, as the owner of the sports agent. He showed up in a taxi in Almost Famous as well. He was Cameron Crowe's boss at Rolling Stone. But again, who sort of exemplifies sort of a three-ish quality, in my view.
When they're talking about, when they're kind of showing all these stats with all the accomplishments of the sports people, there's this boy playing golf who made a mistake and, well, didn't kind of do what he wanted to do. Yeah. And he was blaming the coach,
Yes.
Which is also kind of not accepting failure, which is three-ish as well.
So Jerry Maguire, in kind of a voiceover, he says, I handle the lives and dreams of 72 clients and get an average of 265 phone calls a day. It's what I do. Right. Again, it's that emphasis on, look how awesome I am. I do all this hard work and I make all these great things happen. Let's see. He's on the phone at one point telling a client, I will not rest until I have you holding a Coke, wearing your own shoe, playing a Sega game featuring you, singing your own song, being played on a broadcast of a Super Bowl that you are winning, and I will not sleep until it happens.
There was a character in a TV show that talked like this, and a friend of mine's grandson said, he sounds like an old teenager. And I think that's sort of how Tom Cruise sounded at the beginning of this film too.
Yes. We would, the term wasn't popular then, but he certainly classified as a bro, in using today's terms.
And when he was going around talking to people, he was telling everyone what each person wanted to hear or needed to hear. Right. And it was amazing how he could just find the right word to tell that person to kind of seduce them and charm them.
In my version of things, he would have had a 2-wing. I know you don't do wings, but a 2-streak.
Yeah. So for Maria Jose, would you see him as a transmitting 3 in the movie?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, Tom, the transmitting 3 is what others would call the sexual 3, but it is that fundamental need for that one-to-one connection, right? That's there, kind of mixed with this need to show off, right? And so we're seeing the same thing, I think, right? In just using different terms, perhaps, and it points to me. Because so we see all this stuff, and then he is with a client, a hockey player who has a concussion, and they're all standing around him in the hospital room waiting for him to come out of the concussion, see if he's okay, come back to consciousness. And this was his, 4th or 5th concussion maybe, and the player's son, who was, maybe 11, 12 years old, says to Jerry Maguire, somebody needs to stop him from playing. And Maguire's checking his BlackBerry, and he's saying, nobody can stop your dad. He's going to get back in there. He's going to be awesome, be great. And the kid, basically curses him off, right? And it's at that point Maguire seems to have a crisis of conscience.
It's funny because I think when he was saying that nobody can stop your dad and all of that, he was sure that he was saying the right thing. What the boy wanted to hear, and that he was going to get away with it. And he was surprised when the boy reacted in that way.
When midlife crises are presented sometimes in films and books, a lot of times there's a 3-ish quality to it. And it's not unusual for 3s to have something like a midlife crisis if they've suffered a massive defeat, which is what the film shows, or if they've actually succeeded brilliantly at what they started out to do and decided to accomplish when they were 13 years old. And then they're 40, they have enough money beyond the dreams of avarice, and they've accomplished everything they set out to do, and then there's this now what quality to it.
Exactly.
And the connection to 9 also involves going in circles sometimes on the low side. And he kind of demonstrates that, where you're frantic and you're grasping and you're lost and you're still trying to stay moving as fast as you ordinarily move, but actually your sense of purpose and connection to what you're doing is obscured.
Yeah. So so he does start to have this crisis, and it was interesting for me, the water themes during his dark night of the soul. Right. First, he's on an airport bus in the rain, and he's starting to question, who have I become? Then he's in the hotel room and he has a dream where he's underwater. And he wakes up and decides to start writing a mission statement. Right, he has this inspiration, and it's raining outside of the hotel window. Right, so
And he's sweating.
And he's sweating. Yes, yes, great. And water very often in imagery represents baptism. Right, rebirth. It's this moment of coming out of the womb, coming clean into the world. And so he gets this inspiration and starts writing a mission statement, which was originally going to be one page, but he couldn't stop writing. And he said, I have so much to say and no one to say it to, which was interesting. And he writes a 25-page mission statement. What else did he say here? It was the me I always wanted to be. And he even creates a cover for it that was based on the book The Catcher in the Rye, which I found was an interesting choice for the cover. I
He's
wouldn't
trying to get fired.
So do you think he was aware that he was trying to get fired, or was that this subconscious working? Yeah.
But it's funny that, as threes usually do, he did it in a way that it was well presented. It looked like a novel, and it was just a kind of a memo, a mission statement for his peers, but the cover looked like the cover of a book.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And a book I have a hard time seeing Jerry Maguire reading, right? The Catcher in the Rye. It's not a Jerry Maguire kind of book, but probably a book that he was familiar with, so he made it look like that. And so it was interesting. I don't know if you remember what the copy guy said to him when he went to get the copies made off. The copy guy says, wow, that's how you get great, man. You hang your balls out there, right? And, so Jerry Maguire's feeling real good until he wakes up in the morning. Right.
Yeah,
and
but before that, when he was writing it and he was kind of thinking, and we could hear that, he said, "There's no purpose in all I'm doing." So there's the purpose theme,
yes,
that we have been discussing, and also, I had lost the ability to bullshit, and I think that it's kind of this thing that you can do, say whatever people want to hear, but then he had momentarily lost that ability.
The connection to 6 can contribute to that sometimes, where the person they become more honest, and they become more kind of not self-aware exactly. That's not guaranteed, but they're easier with the whole idea of admitting their fears, for example, and will do it with people they feel close to.
He wakes up and freaks out.
Yeah, so and it was a nice kind of setup to the freak out, because he's watching the TV show Hawaii Five-0, and it's an episode about somebody setting a time bomb somewhere, and they cut to Jack Lord's face.
Jack Lord,
and he says, boom, and that's when Maguire realizes he made a huge mistake to distribute copies of this to all of his coworkers. He goes down into the lobby. All of his coworkers are gathered there. He's hesitant to get off the elevator, but he does, and everybody starts clapping, right? And touching, tapping their chests, and sending him love. And one of them says, "Wow, finally somebody said it." But they all know that his career's over, basically, for having done this.
It's more collective threeness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It really was, again, even that collective, organization or group represented threeness in a huge way there. Right? Now, I have to particularly call out one of my favorite bit actors, Jay Moore, who plays Bob Sugar in the movie, who I just thought was fantastic, played, the ultimate sleazy, slimy Uber 3. For anybody listening who, wants a good taste of Jay Moore, he did this really short-lived TV series called Action, where he played a Hollywood talent agent. and was Bob Sugar on steroids in that movie, and a really funny movie. So a really funny series. I encourage fans to watch that. Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com. Okay, so the next scene here is the bachelor party, and
it was awful. I mean, I don't know how could someone think that he was going to enjoy it when it was so insulting. Hard to believe.
Tell us about the bachelor party, Maria Jose.
So they made this video for him with his former partners or girlfriend. And at the beginning, they say nice things about him, but then all of a sudden it starts to become kind of just insults to him, that he can't be alone, that he's really bad at intimacy, that he's a good friend.
And he's a liar.
And that he's a liar, yeah.
And they all start saying, love you, kind of imitating him, kind of schmoozing, love you. And then you turn and you see his coworkers kind of looking at him and saying, love you in the same sort of way.
And here in North America, we call that a roast.
Yes.
He was roasted.
Yes. And I think it was even, go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Well, and the things that they said in the film were all true. And he sort of knew it. And you could see in the way it was registering how uncomfortable he was because it was true.
So there was, it was a brutal scene, right? I mean, it was just painful to watch, and you could see him kind of disintegrating there in front of the room, right? First of all, he walks in, he puts on this big show about, being surprised when he knew all about it anyway. It's a lot of backslapping. And then before you know it, he's reduced down to a puddle of nothing before he leaves, and then ends up getting fired, in a very humiliating way. Loses all of his clients except for one that he's able to hold on to, which is Rod Tidwell, again played by Cuba Gooding Jr. And this is where the famous "Show me the money" scene happens, right? Rod Tidwell keeps him on the phone for so long that he ends up losing all of his other clients in the meantime. Something we kind of skipped over here is his initial interaction with Dorothy that I wanted to comment on, because Dorothy, again, the Renee Zellweger character, she's listening to Tom Cruise talking about how wonderful his life is while he's in first class, and she's sitting in coach with her sick little boy, or was allergic to the blankets or something. She's kind of idealizing this guy, and I'm listening to him and thinking, oh man, I just want to punch him in the face, right? And but she's kind of googly-eyed about him. But then when she loses her son in the baggage area, you see this side of him, which I find interesting, and again gets to this contradictory thing that we see in Threes of he knows who she is, right? She's kind of a nobody in the organization, but he knows who she is and where she sits and what's in her cubicle. And he helps her, he's very supportive and helps her find her son. What did that say about Threes to you guys?
It didn't say too much to me about Threes, but except that the scene in the baggage pickup area was meant to establish that after all, he's Tom Cruise, sort of a good guy underneath it all. And then I thought the way that she was presented was sort of degrading.
Yes.
I mean, it just seemed kind of like she was this gooey, pile of romantic yearning and helpless and not very competent. And, it was pretty sexist. But like I said, the arc of her character in the film got better. And it was all, to me, it was kind of 90. Not just the way she was when she was idealizing him, but also when she was speaking in a blunt, truthful sort of way later in the film. That part was kind of nice.
And when she was talking to her son, when he appeared, and when it was like, don't ever do that again, or something like that. But she wasn't even angry, or didn't seem to be angry. I do think that what he did, like saying everything that he knew about her, that he had paid attention to her, it's a kind of transmitting three characteristic, like paying attention. It was a way to seduce her or to charm her by saying, look, I know you, I know who you are, I pay attention to you, but then all about me.
Yes.
That's catnip for a 9 also. To be really noticed and to be really seen into and to be recognized and to be to count in some way.
Yeah. I'm gonna take a little more generous stance on that whole characteristic in the character, because it's something I see in my clients who are 3s, of this genuine tenderness and caring underneath, right? And I think the 3s are, particularly in the Enneagram literature, one of the types that gets unfair press, right? Because there is this tendency to emphasize the things we're emphasizing, right? This phoniness of the character, but to miss this genuine, heartfelt sensitivity that they have. I can't tell you how many 3s I've worked with who would, when they start talking about what they want for their family and what they want for their employees, will start to cry, right? I mean, really, and it comes from a real place. And then you can see when they start to feel the pressure of the world again, they just sort of switch over to this other character, right? But I think it's important to, be fair to 3s and give them credit for having this real, genuine heart quality that often gets overlooked.
The connection to 6 also will bring a kind of loyalty. And they can really be sincere in their commitments and really sincere in their sentiments as well.
Yes. Which is a theme that comes back, and we'll get to when we talk more about the relationship with Dorothy. Okay. So
what I also saw in that scene is that when she started kind of telling him all the things she remembered and liked about his mission statement, it was like being seen for real for him. That it wasn't all those kind of all the applause that he got from his co-workers, but it was someone who really saw through all of that and saw him and what mattered to him. And I feel like uncomfortable. You could see that it was new to him.
Certainly different from what he went home to, his fiance Avery, right? Because the next scene is, him in bed with Avery. I think it's the next scene, him in bed with Avery. And she's a very different character. Certainly not a 9, kind of 3-ish. A pretty tough, aggressive person, right? So we'll come back to Avery too, but certainly a different kind of relationship than he was used to.
Well, and the two relationships mirrored his change also.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. All right. So the next scene, so we talked about the bachelor party. The next scene for me is when, so he has one client, but he thinks he has 2 clients, right? And the one that he thinks is his client is Cushman, who's going to be the number 1 draft pick into the NFL. So he's a prize quarterback coming out of college. They have Cushman and his father have a verbal agreement with Jerry to be their representation. So Cushman is his big prize, right? He's the jewel, whereas Tidwell is kind of a second-tier player at this time. And so when Jerry goes to the airport to see his 2 players, he brushes right past Tidwell and goes to Cushman and is glowing over Cushman with all the reporters and that sort of thing. And poor Tidwell is asked if he is Hootie by some kids in the airport, which just of Hootie and the Blowfish, Maria Jose, for in case you weren't aware who that meant, but a real humiliation of that character. So they fly to New York again. It's all about Cush. Tidwell starts to get upset, and eventually Jerry Maguire gets screwed over by Cushman and his father, and who go and sign with Bob Sugar instead, meaning that pretty much Jerry Maguire is wiped out and only has one client that he has to go with.
In the scene when they're at the hotel and they're getting these phone calls by the reporters, and they don't want to answer the phone, and Cushman says that he doesn't want to take the phone because he says, talking without saying anything is not my art. But Jerry goes and takes the phone.
Yeah, I do that well.
Yeah.
But he pretends to be Cushman.
Yes.
Right? And while he's on the phone, he gets the news, or he finds out that he's being screwed over by Bob Sugar and the Cushmans. So it's at this point where Jerry hits rock bottom, right? He also, during this scene, breaks up with Avery, who repays him for all the love in their relationship by punching him in the face a couple of times, kneeing him in the abdomen, and calling him a loser, which is, the ultimate insult for a three. And then we see Jerry and Tidwell taking a taxi rather than a limo to the airport, a step down. And it's here where Jerry says to Tidwell, "Why are you with me? I'm a loser." Right? So He's at bottom now.
So there's another scene before that when he's in the car, when he thinks he has Cushman, and he's singing the song that it's playing on the radio, and he doesn't know the lyrics. So he changes the music and chooses something that he knows, and then he sings again. It's interesting how in all those details you can see Three World as well.
Now he's got to work his way back. He gets drunk. He goes home and he calls Dorothy, and they have what has to be the worst first date ever. If you could even call it a date, where he humiliates himself and basically, I guess, gropes her and, tries to kiss her inappropriately, which for some reason did not seem to, and, put him into the do not date category for her. But
times have changed.
Yes, for the better, I think, for sure. But this starts their relationship. And so what I wanted to talk about is kind of the contrast in these two relationships, and frankly, the believability in the relationships, because again, watching it this time, I really struggled with the believability of that relationship. Share your thoughts with me. What's your read on the relationship with Avery?
Well, she seemed pretty three-ish, and it seemed, like I said, it seemed to mirror his condition. It was pretty obvious that she would have been an enabler, and then some. And then the Renee Zellweger character was meant to be a kind of opposite in the sense of contrasting 3 with 9, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And, she was, that also meant that she was a little bit of a doormat, in contrast to the aggressive fiance. But she got better. She found her voice.
Yeah, I think with Avery, it was like a trophy, and also felt like forced to marry. He when he was telling the story about how he proposed, he was kind of pushed into a corner to propose. And with Dorothy, I think he fell in love with the boy, with Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And that he could feel. It was easier for him. And then he realized slowly that he liked or felt something for her. But it was just trying not to be alone. I don't think he felt anything at the beginning, but he couldn't. It was like he couldn't access that. He didn't have any idea of what that felt like. And he learned about it as the movie kind of passed. So
but it kind of went back and forth. He would kind of dip into it and then lose it. And it was very gradual that way.
Yeah, but he didn't know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
He was clearly incapable of understanding what a real relationship was like. It seemed to me, right? And when you go back to the clips on the bachelor party, the videos of all the old girlfriends, they were all talking about how he couldn't be alone. And really what that talked to me about is the need of the three to be mirrored by other people, right? I always talk about how the three figures out who they are by how other people perceive them, right? And if there's nobody there to perceive me, it's like the proverbial tree falling in the woods, right? Does it make a sound? Well, who knows, right? So did you see that in threes, Tom?
Well, I also see it in extroverts.
Mm.
So there's certainly the three-ish motivation, but if somebody is an extroverted three, what they learn is how to go from paying attention to outside measuring sticks to getting in touch with what comes from the inside out. And that's a learning for extroverts too.
Yeah.
No matter what their Enneagram style.
Yeah. Agreed. Riose?
What I would also highlight is that for him and the relationship with Ray, the boy, when they're talking, he just can't listen to the boy. And he wants to be listened to by him, and it's just ridiculous because he's the grown-up. I mean, he's supposed to be the adult there, and he said, all my life I wanted to talk, like really talk. And it's interesting how kind of immature he seems to be. Rather than bad intentions, I think it's just immature and kind of matures throughout the movie a bit.
Yeah. When he loses Cush, they realize he doesn't have enough money. It's actually not when he loses Cush. He gets Tidwell a commercial. Tidwell doesn't like how the commercial's being done because they want him to sit on a camel. And having sat on a camel, I understand why he didn't want to do it, right? I mean, it's not a fun experience. Maybe something you have to do once, but after that it gets kind of old. But anyway, so they end up losing the commission for that, and Dorothy decides she's going to take a job in San Diego. And so they have this awkward exchange by the moving van where they basically decide to get married. They get married. At the wedding, you can see there's going to be problems right away, and in particular, it's on view when they are watching the video of the wedding. They really turned that video around quickly because it's right, the same day of the wedding. They're watching the video of it, which was kind of odd, but they notice that he does not look particularly happy to be getting married.
He seems uncomfortable. What did I get into?
Exactly. Right. Now, Dorothy picks this up as well. Rod Tidwell picks it up, looks at Dorothy. They have this awkward exchange. And it becomes clear pretty quickly that he is not so sure he made the right decision about getting married. So he starts spending all of his time on the road, going to the games that Tidwell is playing in, his only client, even though he doesn't need to be there. Working, yes, throws himself into work. Say more about that, Tom.
Well, that's what you do. You throw yourself into activity. You throw yourself into a mode where you're a human doing. And in my experience, if you probe around a little bit with an individual three who's doing stuff like that, what you get are conversational metaphors about being a robot, or the Terminator, or an automobile, a race car, that kind of thing. Metaphors, but that are embedded in idioms, that are embedded in how they're talking, but they're also indicators of their internal state.
Yeah. And of course, the thing about a robot is that it's kind of a soulless creature, right? Without a heart, without feelings and emotions, etc. So,
you just check things. You check things off your to-do list, and you feel like you're going to live forever. But it's also a dissociated state. You're out of touch.
Good. So while he's on the road, he has a number of conversations with Rod Tidwell, the Cuba Gooding Jr. character, who is in a very different relationship. Okay, I mean, his relationship with his wife is very emotional, very connected, very to the point of codependence, perhaps, or loss of sense of agency almost, but clearly something different. And there's one point where Tidwell is challenging Jerry, saying, why are you on the road? Why aren't you going back, loving your wife, being, living in your marriage? And Jerry says to him, not everybody has what you have. Okay? Then he asks him, well, why'd you marry her? And to get back to your earlier point, Tom, do you remember what he said as his justification?
Loyalty.
Yeah,
loyalty.
Because she was loyal. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So say more about that, Tom, if you would.
Well, I don't have experiences with threes who got married out of loyalty or because somebody else was loyal to them. But there are threes who have stable long-term marriages, and that's a factor. Yeah. And the factor is related to the connection to six in my mind. And it's related to a kind of pledge of the heart that the person makes and is capable of and is sincere about.
Are you interested in learning more about our approach to the Enneagram? Go to awareness-to-action.com and check out our certification program. We offer a clear, concise, business-friendly, and science-minded approach while maintaining the depth of traditional approaches to the system. At Awareness to Action International, we're the leading innovators in the theory and pragmatic applications of this system to all aspects of the work environment, including leadership and personal development, team building, diversity and culture, and managing change. However, this approach is not just for the business world. A lot of people who attend our trainings do so for their own self-development or spiritual growth. Our certification program is one of only a handful of curricula accredited as a school by the International Enneagram Association. It is currently being conducted virtually and combines live sessions with asynchronous learning. Again, find out more at awareness-to-action.com. And loyalty is a theme, right? I mean, there is loyalty to the player, right? There's loyalty that he shows towards Tidwell. There's loyalty that, Tidwell has toward him, sticking with him when nobody else did, right? So this is clearly something that's important to Jerry Maguire. Now, things sort of come to a head when there's Tidwell is up for a new contract, and he turns down a contract that he thought was beneath him. It's the last game of the season, and it's his chance to shine, to prove that he deserves more money. He's having a great game, making a lot of catches, but he's taking a beating during the game from the opposing defense. And then there is a scene where he catches a ball in the end zone, and when he lands, he kind of, they make it sound like he lands on his head. He doesn't really, lands on his back. But and then he lays there, supposed to be unconscious for a while. Everybody, his family watching on TV is concerned. Jerry's concerned. Oh no, here goes my gravy train, right? His career might be over, et cetera, et cetera. Tidwell lays there with all the doctors around him and all the other players gathered around, until finally he opens his eyes, enjoys the moment, jumps up, starts dancing, carrying on. That was a famous scene, when it came out. I can't tell you how much it bothered me watching it this time, right? Because having seen people injured and knocked unconscious, they don't just jump up and start dancing around, right? Which made me think, okay, is he faking this whole thing? In which case, well, what a jerk, quite frankly, So that scene kind of bothered me, I have to say, when I watched it this time. But, it was crowd pleasing and everybody's excited. And Jerry has this, they're excited because now he's going to get a big contract. They hug each other after the game, show each other lots of love. when Jerry sees him talking to his wife and kind of breaking down into tears, he realizes he loves Dorothy and apparently runs home from Phoenix to L.A. To be with Dorothy. I think he probably...
Which you don't believe for a moment.
well, certainly not that he ran from Phoenix to L.A. because it's about 1,000 miles, I would think. But, he clearly ran to the airport. And this is where
he found there.
He left his phone?
Yeah.
Because, did he? Right.
Tidwell was using his phone.
Oh, I hadn't
he runs without a phone. That's hard to believe for me. I would never do that. I can believe
it was 1996.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. So he goes back to see Dorothy. She's in the room with the angry divorcees, the support group that the sister runs. And they have this sweet, tender moment, where he professes his love and, tells her, you complete me, which he had stolen from the deaf couple in the elevator earlier in the movie. And she stops him with, you had me at hello, right? And apparently they live happily ever after. Now, again, my cynical side is coming out and saying I don't buy a minute of it. And what I really caught this time that was interesting to me is what he was saying towards the end of that little speech is what a cynical business this is, right? He's, and it was a real metaphor to me for the movie industry, right? I think he was a thinly disguised Hollywood agent, right? For the sake of this movie and for Cameron Crowe kind of wielding his axe against the Hollywood system. And I don't know, for me, the ending felt a bit cynical. It felt a bit manipulative. And, I was almost wondering if Cameron Crowe was in on the cynicism of the ending of the movie. Now, that's me at my unromantic best. I don't know. How did you guys feel?
After everything, it was a rom-com.
This is true.
And it gives me something to think about, but your perspective. But in my case, I saw it, as I said before, he didn't know how to love. And he didn't know how to have a real relationship. And I think that he had a breakthrough, not that he realized that now I love Dorothy. It's like, okay, this is what it feels like. I'm having a good moment and I want to share it with her. When he gets the phone call, he says Dorothy, and it was Tidwell's wife. Mm-hmm. And he realized that he wanted to share that moment with Dorothy. And I think that he felt, that's my interpretation, like, okay, this is what it is. Now I know. So I'll go back to her. It's not like he fell in love with her at that moment. He understood what love was and then went back to her.
The wife, Cuba Gooding's wife in that film, was kind of 8-ish, but when she talked to him on the phone in the scene that you're talking about, she was really vulnerable. Yes. And there was a kind of nice contrast that I've seen in 8s anyway.
Yeah, the weak ones. So
the sissies, 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 and girls, just girls.
So, in fairness, there was also this theme of, how do you know when you're in love? Well, you know when you know, right? And so I hear what you're saying, Maria Jose, about that moment when, okay, so this is what it feels like. And so I don't know, maybe on if I got up on the right side of the bed, I would be more generous toward toward the end of the movie there.
That was well acted, actually. You could see it in his face, what Maria Jose is talking about. For sure. And why are you smiling, Maria Jose? Go ahead. Wait. Yeah.
You see, you just have to learn. You just no, go ahead.
So I will say Tom Cruise was really good in this, right? I don't know if he was playing anything other than Tom Cruise in the movie, but Tom Cruise is a great actor. Well, is he a great actor? He's a great actor playing Tom Cruise, I think. And there are certainly movies where he has been phenomenal. Usually not his more famous movies, I think. But was it Magnolia that he was in? I think that was probably one of his best characters. Anyway, So for sure, as a movie that captured three. I also want to, again, go back to this idea of redemption, which is so important. And, even when he was being fired, there was this, he looks at the water glass for a few moments, and again, it's this theme of water as washing away the sins and growth.
There's something else I think that it's that I've seen in threes, and it's this ability to get the best out of people around them and cheer them up and kind of just make them grow and be the best they can. And he certainly did that. And also be inspiring. And you could see when they were hugging at the end, Tidwell, how another player said, to Bob Sugar, why don't you do that? Why don't we have that?
Why don't we have that relationship?
Yeah. And it seemed honest. It did seem real.
From the player. Yes, from the player.
No, and the hug between Tidwell and Jerry, it was something real, and it was inspiring.
The other thing that was implied in the film was that Jerry had a mentor, and a mentor with values. And one of the things I've noticed with threes is that they're very good at modeling, which is close to their defense of trying to seem like they're somebody other than they are. But they're very good at, say, having a role model and stepping into the role model and acquiring the basis for a skill or some sort of talent. And then after they grow and change, or after they succeed at what they set out to succeed at, they are very good at being mentors.
Yes, that's a great point, and I agree with it. It just made me think of a number of clients I have who are often talking about their mentors, right, in very deliberate and consistent ways. And again, Maria Jose, to your point, this desire to really bring out the best in other people, right? And so, the U.S. Army used to have this very three-ish slogan of "Be all you can be," right? And we see people like Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra and motivational speakers who tend to fall into that three thing, and it can almost, in some of them it's insincere, and others it's sincere. But I would agree that when it is coming from a sincere place, as it is a lot of the time in threes, it is very moving, right? Again, to that point I was making earlier about the three's sensitivity and desires for their families and so forth. So, so I want to be sure that we're fair to threes, because again, they get beat up on a lot. But when they do tap into that hard quality, it really is quite special. And we need threes around, right? I mean, they have this ability to bring out so much in other people and to achieve things that, we'd still be living in caves if it weren't for threes, I think.
What I liked about the movie is what I think, Tom, you said at the beginning, that it's not like he's kind of the bad version and then he becomes the good version. He goes in and out of that, kind of the better, higher qualities of the three throughout the movie. And I think that shows how real people are. We're not kind of completely wrong or bad, and then become kind of a good person or grow in every aspect. I think we are more complex, and we tap into these good aspects and then kind of leave. And I think this movie shows that really well.
Well, the Enneagram is describing central tendencies. And the ones that people usually want to get over are the defensive excesses of their style. But that's a central thing. And when somebody grows and changes, they change in relation to that central thing, if they're using the Enneagram and prescribed methods. And in that process, there's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back a lot of the time. You watched him go into it, get in touch with something, but it was so alien that it wasn't going to stick. Then the more experience you have with that very thing is the better.
Yeah.
It was like he got scared and then pulled back.
Got scared, and that's the low side of 6, kind of trying to conceal. Or there's a counterphobic version of 6 also, or the connection to 6, from 3. where and Tom Cruise has it in real life, I think. He dives out of airplanes all the time and does, daring physical things. One of his next movies is going to be shot in outer space.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I hadn't heard that. I know he's, has done incredible stunt work and,
Right.
really pushes the limits on that. It's surprising that the insurance companies will insure him given some of the things that he does. So, and again, for me, that just shows this tremendous dedication to excellence that he has, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you have to admire. I mean, so anyway, so my cynicism about the movie aside, I think it is fair to say that it really does capture the three at their best and their worst, right? And it does, accurately capture these themes of growth for a three. So if you're, wanting to see a good example of three and how they grow and change over life, Jerry Maguire is a good place to go. So we're going to wrap this up here, and then we're going to start changing topics a little bit and talk about some other Enneagram-related things, about movies in general from Tom's perspective, and the state of the Enneagram as it is, and zombie movies. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action podcast network. Find out more about the Enneagram and our offerings at awareness-to-action.com. And if you enjoyed the episode, please go online and give us a review. We'll see you next time.